Broadcasting live from Lothal. Good morning, Lothal. It's the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to Good Morning Lothal, the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. I'm your host, Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora.
How we doing, Rolly?
I'm good. I'm a little bit under the weather. I think my voice is kind of whack. I was telling you before we started. I'm having trouble hearing a little bit, but that's okay.
It's all right. It's all right.
I know you got some stuff going on. I was thinking maybe we tell the crowd what's up, what happened last week.
Yes. As you may or may not have picked up on, the episode that just dropped this past Friday was actually supposed to drop the Friday before that, but we had some issues over here at the show, one of which was I mentioned at the top of that show that my back wasn't feeling great, but it just my back just totally shit the bed, I guess is the best way to put it. And I had to basically, I was out of work all week, and I was, just kind of laid up because I don't know, man. I went and saw a couple different chiropractors and different stuff like that. I had an MRI done, just stuff like that. So I'm in the process of trying to get that work done, but for now, we were delayed a week, so I'm trying not to let that affect our shooting/recording schedule. But no promises, but I'm going to do my very best, because it would be one thing if we just, met up once a week to record this and then we just put it out on, put it out. But there is a fair amount of work that goes into this project. So if I'm not able to give it my all, then I'd rather just my body's saying take a time out. So that's kind of what happened. So I'm sorry if we skipped a week. I'm sorry if there will be future weeks that we skip, but I'm going to try to minimize that as much as possible.
Yeah, I hope things turn out for the better for you, man. Thank you.
I appreciate it. But on to more exciting news. Let's get right back into the world of Star Wars, which is where, as we've said, we both thrive. So today's episode, we'll be talking about Season 2, Episode 18. It's called Shroud of Darkness. But before we get to that, Rolly, what's going on around the galaxy?
Let's see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
All right, so we got a couple of weeks worth of news to catch up on in Star Wars, and there was a lot of it. So starting off, you guys might remember that in the previous episode, they gave out the first wave of guest announcements for Star Wars Celebration. So we got 2 sets more. So I'm going to go down the list. And just a reminder, for those of you that are attending Star Wars Celebration, it is going to be in London this year from April 7th to the 10th. Mm-hmm. And the recently announced guests are Hayden Christensen, who plays Anakin Skywalker, of course. Dennis Lawson, which is a really cool one. He plays Wedge Antilles in the original trilogy, and you guys will remember he also made that comeback for The Rise of Skywalker. Here's a really cool one that I'm jealous of fans that are going to get to meet him. Mads Mikkelsen, who plays Galen Erso in Rogue One.
Oh man, that's awesome. Love to meet him.
Yeah, that's easily one of the coolest villains that he plays in every movie he comes out in, with the exception of Rogue One, I guess, but he's typically casted as a villain and he just always knocks it out of the ballpark.
Yep, absolutely.
Another cool one, Katie Sackhoff, who you guys know as Bo-Katan Kryze, and remember she plays her in live action and voices her in the Clone Wars, which I thought was incredibly awesome. Next on the list is James Arnold Taylor, who voices the animated Obi-Wan Kenobi in Clone Wars, who I hope to meet here coming up in March at C2E2.
Nice.
Gwendolyn Christie, who plays Captain Phasma. Y'all will remember her from Game of Thrones as well. Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec Shand and voices her in her appearance in The Bad Batch Season 1. Matthew Wood, who voices General Grievous, and I believe he voices him in both Revenge of the Sith and Clone Wars, if I'm not mistaken. So that's also another cool one. Joonas Suotamo, who plays Chewbacca. Silas Carson, who plays Ki-Adi Mundi. And last but certainly not least, for all you Rogue One fanatics, Aiden Cook, who plays Two Tubes. He's part of Saw Gerrera's troop. I think they kind of like mock him a bit in Andor, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I think there was a scene where I already forgot the guy's name. We just get so much Star Wars now. Where he meets up with Saw Gerrera and he kind of purposely misinterprets Two Tubes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yes. Now I do. I was struggling to remember what you were talking about, but yes, I do remember. And it was Lothal.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we actually got some new news today as well. The day we're recording, Monday, February 6th. This is one I'm kind of looking forward to. E.K. Johnston, who wrote the Ahsoka book and who also wrote the Padme series, or Queen Amidala series to be exact. She just announced today that there is going to be a Star Wars Crimson Climb book that she is releasing, and this story is based off of Kira and her rise in Crimson Dawn, as you guys might remember from the Solo movie.
Well, that's awesome, because you had been saying every time we bring up Solo, or Kira for that matter, you always mention how you'd love to hear more story behind her or whatnot, and here it is. And one of your favorite authors is going to do it too.
Yeah, seriously, she did. A.K. Johnson does such a great job in the Star Wars universe. She does. She really understands it, and she writes it to a level that I can certainly understand and not get too lost in.
Right.
And there hasn't been any details or release date given yet, but she did announce via her social media that she'll be releasing details on it soon. So once I find out, I will let you guys know. We got some bad news also this past week, and that is that Jedi Survivor, which is the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, originally slated for March 16th, is now being pushed back to April 28th. So gonna have to wait just a little bit longer, guys, to get back to Cal Kestis' story.
Yep. But that's okay for people like me who just picked up Fallen Order like last month. So my back's against the wall. I've got looks like 3 months to get it done, which is not going to happen. It's unrealistic, but that's okay.
It's a relatively short game, so I would say if you started it, you probably finish it real quick. The boss battles, maybe, I don't know if it's just because I'm old and video games are now hard for me. The boss battles are very irritating, but lower the difficulty, power through the story, and you got it.
I'm stuck on the loading screen, bro, so I don't know.
All right, before we get to the birthdays, I want to talk about the Bad Batch. The previous episode, it was entitled Tribe. If you guys didn't pick up on the name and pasted it together with the trailer, Tribe implied that we were going to get the Wookiee story. And as you guys kind of saw in the trailers, we got Gunji back, which is the Wookiee youngling that was featured in the Clone Wars season. I forget the season, but the Clone Wars younglings arc, where Ahsoka actually leads the younglings to get their kyber crystals and make their lightsaber hilts, which, I don't know about you, Pete, was easily one of my favorite Clone Wars episodes.
That was a really cool episode. I do remember that one specifically.
Yeah, so it's really cool that we got the episode, kind of get some answers to Gunji, and that's what we got. And what were your thoughts on the episode?
It was one of those episodes that had like one singular point to it, which is the group was, I guess they were delivering some pieces or whatever. They were on the tail end of a mission that they had, and they end up stumbling across some droids that were like torturing this young Wookiee, which of course catches the eye of Omega, who's quickly becoming the heart and soul of that group, and especially the empathetic side of it, the ones that goes out and is seeking things, how to help, basically. And there was one prime example of how to help. So they met Gunji, and I liked it a lot because of the backstory on the Wookiees that we got from it.
Yeah, I agree. Really, the only time we got like somewhat more Wookiee story in Star Wars was in Revenge of the Sith, but even at that, we really didn't get anything. So this episode, really did a really good job of getting to the details of the Wookiee ways, their culture, what it is that they quote unquote worship. Like for me, the big thing was the way that they talk to the trees.
Yes.
It's almost like if it's like a force sensitive situation, but really it's not. Obviously for Gunji it is, but we see the other Wookiees communicating with the trees as well. So it's definitely something that's a little bit out of the norm for Star Wars. Like I said, we typically associate that with force sensitivity, but it's not. And it was really, really cool to see that on screen. And it was really cool to see the way Omega and the rest of the batch really, how do I say, I don't think thrive is the word, but they just really feel like at home. Remember that our Clone Force 99 doesn't have a home anymore. Theirs is destroyed. So for them, getting Gunji back to his people was a big deal. And what I really liked about that too was, you guys remember in the very first episode, Echo tells Hunter that they need to be doing more, not just be doing side missions to make money from Sid. Right. And I think this was the first prime example of them going above and beyond, particularly knowing that Gunji is a Jedi, and he knew, or they knew rather, that was probably not going to be well received by him at first, considering that the clones turned on the Jedis during Order 66. Right.
And I had missed that point, that I really like the connection of the trees. It is like you were saying, not so much force sensitivity with animals or other species. It is more of a like one with nature kind of a thing. Yes. They had the Wookiees were closer to like a Native American tribe kind of a situation where it's almost like I felt the same. It was the thing that I thought of most when I saw the elderly Wookiee like tribes woman or whatever, like the ancient one, I guess to call it that, was kind of like that episode of Tales of the Jedi where we met baby Ahsoka and her group. It was kind of, it had that same vibe to it. That's what I picked up on, at least.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking the same thing on that one. I made that connection as well. And then, of course, I was also really upset because I feel like they're furthering, continuing to tease me with Omega's maybe force sensitivity, because at the end of the episode, we get her and Gunji connecting with the trees. And it's almost like I said, she's doing it for them because she's helping them. But at the same time, I can't help but think, well, Omega's not a Wookiee, so what is she really sensing? Right. When she's quote unquote talking to the trees the same way Gunji is.
Exactly.
So, I thought it was a really great episode. I know that there's been a bit of talk on social media, and even my friends were like, we're getting a lot of filler for the Bad Batch, but I thought that this one was a standout episode for me. Right. And I do know, just to give you guys a heads up, next week is 2 episodes of the Bad Batch. One of them is called The Clone Conspiracies. The other one, I don't recall, but it is supposed to be treated as a mid-season finale, even though there's not going to be a break. Okay. And from what I have heard, that they're going to be like standout episodes, must-watch Star Wars. So
okay, so like a 2 episode arc, basically, to close off that chapter, and then, but you're saying there's not going to be a break.
There's no break, but the producers and such, I was browsing Twitter today, and they're teasing that they're big episodes. So I'm excited to talk about them next week.
Excellent.
Okay, let's round out This Week in Star Wars with some birthdays. Mind you, this is 2 weeks, so we got a few. First, we have Phil Lamar, born January 24th. He voices Kit Fisto and Bail Organa in The Clone Wars and Rebels. Pizza mega fan on this next one. Mercedes Varnado, January 26th. We know her as Sasha Banks also because we're wrestling fanatics. Yes. She plays Casca Reeves in The Mandalorian.
Or get with it, bro. Her new name is Mercedes Monet.
Monet, there you go.
since Sasha Banks is copyrighted, so that's what she's going with now.
Okay, edit that one out. Sorry.
That's all right. Sorry.
And next on our list, we have Valine Kane, January 30th. She plays Lyra Erso in Rogue One. Very short role at the very beginning of Rogue One, but she plays Jyn Erso's mother. Next on our list, I thought was a really cool one because I think we missed it when we were talking about the episodes. Brett Spiner, February 2nd. He voices Gaul Travis in Rebels. You will remember him as the the senator that basically sold out the Rebel Alliance, or attempted to anyways.
And he's
but I thought that was really cool because he's from Star Trek, right?
Right. He's one of those crossovers from the Star Trek universe. He played Data on The Next Generation.
Yeah, not to insult the Star Trek listeners out there. So if you want to blow me up in the comments for guessing on that one, I just totally went with the picture. I did not do anything.
It's all good.
Research. This one's near and dear to Lucasfilm fans, not just Star Wars fans. Warwick Davis, February 3rd. He plays Wicket in Return of the Jedi, who's kind of like the featured Ewok, so to say. But he also plays Willow, which is a huge part of Lucasfilm.
Another one,
yeah. And then last, but certainly not least on our list, Moses Ingram, February 6th. You guys will remember her as Reva, aka the third sister in Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yep. One hell of an addition to the Inquisitors group, which is ironic because the Inquisitors were heavily featured in this week's episode of Rebels. So why don't you hit us with a synopsis of this week's episode, Rolly?
So in this week's episode, Kanan, Ezra, and Ahsoka return to the Jedi Temple on Lothal, seeking to learn how the Inquisitors continually track them down. Each has a different experience, and nothing will ever be the same.
Okay, this was a big one. This was a big episode. It was a really good episode. We got a lot of returning fan favorites. We got a lot of cool angles and pieces of this episode. So I'm really hyped to get into talking about this one. So basically, the show opens with Ezra and Kanan, and they're dueling with the seventh sister and the fifth brother. Of course, are the Inquisitors. The rebels are exploring the planet to see if it was suitable for a base until they're found by the Inquisitors, which now makes it unsuitable. During the duel, Ezra is knocked off a cliff but is caught by Kanan, who prevents him from flying. While Ezra's hanging there, he's able to connect with some nearby Tibidi. Is that how I said? Tibidi. They're Minok type creatures from season 1. They basically look like those big stingrays that fly through space. And they sweep in and they catch him to take the rebels to safety. The Phantom arrives shortly after, picking up the rebels from the creatures. So you want to take it from here, Rolly?
Yeah, sure. And I just want to comment, there was some really cool standout stuff in that opening scene. Number one, I don't know about you, I didn't write this in the notes, Pete, but did you get that Lord of the Rings vibe, the way the eagles sweep in?
Yes.
And save the fellowship, or save the hobbits, so to say. I kind of got that vibe with the TVDs flying in and saving Ezra and Kanan. I thought that was really cool, and I'm sure that was intentional.
Right.
These things don't happen on accident. You got fanboys making animation for fanboys. So
exactly.
And then I also wanted to point out two other things. Like Pete was talking about the TVD. These creatures were a throwback to season 1 from the Rise of the Old Masters episode that featured Luminara. These are the creatures that were pestering Hera on the Ghost when they were trying to execute a plan to rescue Luminara. And then the other cool thing I thought was there was a moment in this duel with the Inquisitors where Kanan is face to face with the Seventh Sister. And you guys might remember that I mentioned that the Seventh Sister is voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar. Mm-hmm. Well, she makes a comment to Kanan and says, "Oh, such a pretty face." And she's making this comment because Freddie Prinze Jr., who voices Kanan, is her real life husband. Right.
And
I thought that one was really cool.
Yeah, I liked his reply was like, I'm not into crazy anymore. Whatever. So there might have been another little shot back at her. So that was fun.
Yeah. So continuing on with the episode, and bear with me guys, my voice is kind of like stuttering, so I might have to stop here and there. Kanan and Ezra regroup with the Ghost after the TBDs save them. And they're both frustrated because they're unable to secure a base for the rebels. And this might seem typically like the norm, but Kanan starts realizing we're endangering the entire rebel fleet because these Inquisitors are after us. They're hunting down Jedi. So anytime we regroup, we're endangering everybody else. So he reaches out to Hera to basically come pick them up or rendezvous with them, but to not bring the entire Phoenix Squadron fleet with them. And Kanan has a plan already because it's implied that he mentions to Hera to bring Ahsoka because they need to go about Jedi business, as Anakin might say it.
Right.
So when they regroup with the Ghost, Hera says, she's waiting for you. Why did you have us meet you out here away from the fleet? Kanan says, it's safer this way. And after that, the scene cuts to Ahsoka sitting in Kanan's quarters, meditating, rewatching a holocron recording of Anakin giving lightsaber training. Anakin says, keep your saber moving is key to deflecting the fire of multiple adversaries. Fluid motion, one into the next, and so on. I've made some adjustments to the classic Form 4 techniques that I think you'll find work well against droids and other ranged attackers. Here, I'll show you once more. 1, 2, 3. And Ezra walks in as Ahsoka's watching this, and he says, he's amazing. I've watched these recordings to help me with my own saber training. And Ahsoka says, you should have seen him in person. Anakin Skywalker. He was my master. Ezra responds, Kanan said he was the greatest warrior the Jedi had in the Clone Wars. And Ahsoka says, he was powerful, rarely lost a battle. What would have surprised people was how kind he was. He cared deeply about his friends and looked out for them until the end. And then we hear Anakin again on the holocron recording say, practice these exercises mindfully and you'll see improvement, I promise. And I thought this was cool too, because it was almost a shout out to the Tales of the Jedi episode where he specifically trains Ahsoka one-on-one. I don't think it was reference to that exact battle scene, but it was cool that I'm making this connection after Tales of the Jedi just debuted. Again, I don't think that these things are not intentional. I think there's a lot of intent there.
Right.
So going back to the conversation, Ezra says, do you know what happened to him? And Ahsoka says, the last time I saw him, he was rushing off to save the Chancellor. Then everything changed. Obviously referencing Revenge of the Sith. The war ended and the Jedi were accused of treason. One by one, they were hunted down. And Ezra says, by the Inquisitors. And Ahsoka says, or worse. And when she says this, Kanan enters the room. And Kanan says, speaking of Inquisitors, Ahsoka, what do you think about us doing the hunting for a change? And Ahsoka says, when you defeated one, 2 more came. Who's to say we wouldn't multiply our problems yet again? Ezra goes, and then there's Vader. Kanan says, I don't disagree, but the fact remains we can't protect our friends from Vader and his Inquisitors. I can barely protect you. Ezra confidently says, I don't need protecting. And Ahsoka says, it's times like these that Anakin and I would turn to someone like Obi-Wan or Master Yoda. They always had the answer. Well, almost always. And Kanan says, then maybe we should ask Master Yoda himself. Okay, Pete, can you help me out since my voice is kind of struggling today?
Sure will.
Pick up on the show.
All right. So next, after Ezra suggests that they talk to Yoda, Kanan, Ahsoka, and Ezra head to the temple, the Jedi temple on Lothal, in an attempt to try to communicate with Master Yoda, which is a callback to season 1, Path of the Jedi, which was an excellent episode. Yes. When they arrive, Ezra suggests to Kanan that Kanan and Ahsoka open the door to the temple, but Ahsoka informs Ezra that she cannot, as she is no longer a Jedi. I really like that little note that, she can't help because she's not a Jedi anymore. That was a nice little, I don't know, just a reminder of what path she's been on.
Yes.
Kanan and Ezra open the door, only this time Ezra is surprised that it is not the same entrance as before, and Kanan states, well, new problem, new door. When they walk inside, Ahsoka asks the Jedi how they contact Master Yoda. And Kanan says, well, he kind of contacted us. And Ezra says, I thought I was dreaming when I first heard Master Yoda's voice. Kanan says, and I was meditating. Ahsoka says, then perhaps that's a good place to start. The 3 Jedi then form a circle and begin meditating together. And Kanan says, I see a doorway. And that just then like a light starts, it starts shining in the room, but it's interesting because only Kanan can see it. And
yes.
Ahsoka says, then Ezra says, where? I don't see anything. Ahsoka says, neither do I. Kanan says, last time we spoke to Master Yoda, we were separated. Maybe this is my path alone. And Kanan approaches the doorway and enters. And Ezra says, where'd he go? He just disappeared. And Ahsoka says, as you know, these temples can be tricky. So Kanan enters the room and finds himself in a kind of like a training dojo with a temple guard waiting for him. And the guard says, I wonder when you would return. And Kanan says, a temple guard, I've come for knowledge. I need to know how to defeat Vader and his Inquisitors. The guard says, try to fight and you will fail. The rebellion will be destroyed. You will die and your apprentice will become a servant of evil. And Kanan says, what are you talking about? The guard says the dark side. It pulls at him. It calls to him. Eventually, he will be consumed by it. Stand aside. The boy must be eliminated before he embraces the darkness. And Kanan says, I won't let that happen. Kanan and Temple Guard ignite their sables and begin dueling. You want to try this one?
Yeah. So while that's going on outside of the temple, we see Chopper scanning for Imperial signals, basically being the watch as they're inside the Jedi Temple. And he does end up picking up an Imperial signal, and he jumps on the Phantom and flees. So sure enough, the two Inquisitors arrive, and the fifth brother and the seventh sister step out of their TIE fighters, and the fifth brother says that he believes that the rebels have fled, because he's kind of looking at the tracks in the ground, seeing that the Phantom was there, but it's no longer there. The seventh sister, who thinks herself the dominant one in that partnership, thinks otherwise, and she has her droid scan the stone monument that's in front of them, not knowing that it's a temple, but knowing that it's not that easy. They're still here. She senses them. So sure enough, the droid confirms to the Inquisitors that it is indeed a Jedi temple, with the fifth brother stating that if that's the case, their sanctuary will be their tomb. So cutting back to Ahsoka and Ezra, who are still meditating inside the temple, Ezra proceeds to ask Ahsoka more about Yoda. And Ezra says, "You knew Master Yoda?" And Ahsoka responds, "Yes. He taught almost all of the younglings in the temple at one point or another." Ezra says, "Kanan described him to me, small, green, and wrinkly with pointy ears, but he didn't know what he was really like." And Ahsoka says, "I'm not sure anyone did. He was wise, kind, but when I was young, he seemed happier. As the Clone Wars dragged on, he carried a great burden, a deep sorrow, as if he knew before anyone else that one time was ending and another beginning." And I love the way that they wrote that into the episode perfectly, because that is a callback to season 6 of the Clone Wars, The Lost Missions, specifically the very last arc where it is revealed to Yoda by the Wheels of the Force and Qui-Gon what's happening, how the Shroud of Darkness that the Emperor's casting is basically about to overthrow the Republic and eliminate like several Jedi. And that's one of those questions that we can debate on sometime, as to why, if Yoda knew all this, why he didn't do anything. But nonetheless, this was a reference to specifically that arc from the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. So when she says this, Ahsoka's still meditating, but after she says it, she opens her eyes and she sees that Ezra is no longer in front of her. And mind you, Ezra was meditating too, and he proceeds to open his eyes, and sure enough, he finds himself in the same open space he was before when they visited the temple. And he sees Yoda in front of him this time. This time, he remember guys, he sees them here. In the first time meeting, he didn't see him. He just heard his voice and talked to him. So Ezra opens his eyes and says, "Wait, I know this place." And Yoda says, "Special to you it is." And Ezra goes, "Master Yoda, you're here." And Yoda says, "Or here you are." And Ezra responds, "Last time I couldn't see you." And Yoda responds, "Growing your abilities are, and with them, danger."
So the show cuts back to Kanan, and he's still dueling the temple guard in the dojo. The guard force pushes Kanan towards the wall where several lightsaber hilts are displayed. Kanan grabs one of the hilts to dual wield them, and when he ignites it, is surprised to see that it has a red blade. The guard questions the extent of Kanan's knowledge of dueling and tells him that he will never be strong enough to protect his pupil, and he will perish for his failure. So the show then cuts back to Ahsoka, who remains alone meditating. In her meditation, she hears Anakin calling to her, and a spiritual manifestation of Anakin appears behind her. And Anakin says, Ahsoka, why did you leave? Where were you when I needed you?" Which is a callback to season 5, the ending of the Clone Wars.
When Ahsoka leaves the temple, or the
correct
Jedi, to be specific, yes.
Right. That's when she can't take it anymore. She's gone. She has to leave. And Ahsoka said, "I made a choice. I couldn't stay." Anakin says, "You were selfish. You abandoned me. You failed me. Do you know what I've become?" And then the manifestation of Vader now appears with the breathing and all that excellent stuff that was just... and Ahsoka screams, "No!" as she ignites her saber and swings it behind her, only to find Anakin is not there anymore. That was one of those powerful scenes, man. I know that you've got your own opinion on it, but it's almost like her internal dialogue and her manifesting Anakin, and of course Anakin was going to be like the biggest burden, the biggest anxiety, the whatever it is that she's carrying, the biggest pain and regret in her life is Anakin, is not knowing, and in this case knowing what happened to him. So I really enjoyed that scene. That was badass.
Yeah, she's very much still fighting the fact that at the beginning of the season, you guys will remember she connected with Vader during that space battle, and she knows that it's Anakin, but she doesn't fully believe it because she hasn't seen it yet. So she's fighting it, even though her feelings, as Yoda would say, search your feelings.
Right.
Or no, as Vader would say, search your feelings, you know, to be true. She's fighting. She doesn't want to believe it. So this is for the Force now telling her, hey, he has become evil. This is who he is. So you need to accept that. So after that scene, we cut back to Ezra, who's still having a conversation with Master Yoda. And Ezra says, Master Yoda, you're powerful. You must know a way to destroy Vader and his Inquisitors. And Yoda responds, Padawan, thousands of Jedi once there were. Then came war. In our arrogance, joined the conflict swiftly we did. Fear, anger, hate. Consumed by the dark side, the Jedi were. And Ezra says, was it wrong for the Jedi to fight? Is it wrong for me to want to protect my friends? And Yoda goes, wrong. A long time thought I did. Consumed by fear I was. Though see it, I did not. And Ezra says, you were afraid? And Yoda says, yes, afraid. Surprised are you? A challenge lifelong it is, not to bend fear into anger. And when he says that, we kind of see stones falling from the sky, implying that the temple is starting to collapse, or in this case, the Inquisitors are lifting the stone to reveal the doorway. Mm-hmm. And Ezra says, what's happening? And Yoda responds, found you, the enemy has. And then sure enough, we cut back to the outside of the temple, and we see the Inquisitors are using the Force, and they're successfully moving the stone to reveal the doorway to the temple. So after that, we then cut back to Kanan, who's still dueling the temple guard in the dojo. And the guard does manage to best Kanan, knock him down to one knee, and have Kanan in a position where he has to yield. And the guard says, even now, the servants of the dark side come for your apprentice. You cannot fight forever. And Kanan says, you're right. I can't protect Ezra forever. Not even from himself. All I can do is what I've done. Train him the best I could. And when Kanan says this, the temple guard proceeds to lift his saber in a position like he's going to issue a final killing blow. And then when he swings it back down, he stops it right on Kanan's shoulder, and he tells him, by the right of the council, by the will of the Force, Kanan Jarrus, you may rise. And Kanan says, wait, what does this mean? And then when he says this, the temple guard removes his ceremonial helmet, and he reveals himself to be the fallen Grand Inquisitor from season 1. And he tells him, it means you are what I once was, a knight of the Jedi Order. The temple is falling. Go, I will delay the enemy. So awesome. Really awesome revealing scene. This is one of my favorite episodes in Rebels, but this scene basically brings you full circle as to who the Grand Inquisitor was in a previous life.
Right.
Yeah, and of course you guys get more of that for you listeners and viewers who did see Rebels before Obi-Wan Kenobi was featured. You know there's more history to all the Inquisitors at that, including Reva, I mean, the Grand Inquisitor himself. So I would say for the most part, if not all, every single one of these Inquisitors was a former Jedi. And then another cool thing I forgot to mention about that scene is I think that's the first time we've seen like an actual knighting of a Jedi Knight.
Yes.
In Star Wars. Very similar to what we know of as like what a knight is, you know, back in medieval times. Mm-hmm. So I thought that one was a really cool, powerful moment. Something new to Star Wars that I thought was really cool and really gives definition to what it is to be a Jedi Knight. And I think also, remember we've talked about this before, Kanan really does question if he's doing right by Ezra, if he's doing right by him on, you know, by his own standard of being a master. And I think this really solidifies that, as in, hey, you know, I've done everything right. Now here's the title that merits You just being higher in the order that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is a good point. I didn't even think about that. I guess I just take it for granted that like a Jedi master has to be the one that, you know, almost like if we're talking about medieval or even in current time, like in the British knighthood, it's usually done by a member of royalty, of the royal family. So there's no more Jedi around anymore, or at least the order's gone. Who would be the one that metaphorically would knight Kanan? And I thought it was quite poetic that it was the Grand Inquisitor that ended up doing it.
Yeah, and it's actually the Force doing it, basically, because remember, the Grand Inquisitor is gone, so the Force is manifesting this for Kanan to be knighted. So I think that's something I didn't even think about right now until you made that comment. That makes it that much cooler, in my opinion. Yeah. So going back to the show, we then cut back to Ezra yet again, who's still talking to Yoda. And Ezra says, "Yeah, but Master Yoda, how are we supposed to win if we don't fight back?" And Yoda says, Win. How Jedi choose to win, the question is. And Ezra says, "We already chose. We're going to fight." And Yoda says, "Find Malachor." And Ezra goes, "Malachor? Who's Malachor?" And Yoda vanishes without giving Ezra an answer. And he screams, "Master Yoda? Like, where did you go? Master Yoda." So after that, we see that the Inquisitors do manage to reveal the doorway to the temple, and they enter. And it's kind of implied that they're going to encounter Ezra, Kanan, and Ahsoka, who are now regrouping. They're leaving their respective chambers where they're going through these experiences with the Force. But when they walk in, it's not them that they encounter. They actually encounter all the temple guards, as the Grand Inquisitor himself said, "Go, I'll deal with your foes." So it surprises both of them, because he walks out without his helmets or mask, whatever, and they're shocked because this was their former partner / boss, whatever you want to call him.
Right.
And now he's working for the good guys, so to say. So the temple guards proceed to attack the Inquisitors into like this bright cascade of light, just to kind of tell you like they're dealt with, they're gone, quote unquote. And as that's going on, Ezra, Kanan, and Ahsoka, they're looking for a way to exit the temple. They're sprinting through caves, tunnels to find an exit. And when they find the exit that they're looking for, as they're running, Ahsoka proceeds to feel a familiar presence behind her, and she turns around, and sure enough, it's Master Yoda. And Yoda proceeds to wave at her, and Ahsoka smiles back, acknowledging him as she continues to run out of the temple. And I've told my friends this before when I saw this. I don't know if you caught on to it, but that was a direct nod to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when they're leaving the temple, and the dad turns around and he sees the knight, and he waves at him. Yeah.
I did not pick up on that at all, man. Good call, Rolly. Good call.
That is a direct like scene. Like, that is the exact same scene that occurs. And sure enough, I did look that up when I first realized it. And yeah, the director or somebody confirmed that was purposely done.
That's cool, man. That's really cool.
So as they run outside, the three are met by Chopper, who's on the Phantom, ready to pick them up and get them out of there, as he alerts them that more Imperials are on their way. And when they board the Phantom, Ezra tells Kanan and Ahsoka about his conversation with Master Yoda. And Ezra says, "I saw Master Yoda." And Kanan says, "Saw him? What did he say?" Ezra responds, "He said to find Malachor." "But who's Malachor?" And Ahsoka says, "Malachor isn't a person, it's a place." So to end the episode, we cut back to the Jedi Temple on Lothal. And the Imperial reinforcements that Chopper alerted the rebels about was actually Darth Vader, who has arrived to see this temple for himself. And Vader walks in, and when he sees what he sees, he says, "My master will be most pleased with this discovery." And the fifth brother says, "Lord Vader, the Jedi are growing in their power." And Vader says, "It will be their undoing." And that's how the episode ends.
Excellent. Anytime that an episode ends on a close up of Vader's mask and with his voice saying something ominous like "it will be their undoing." Like that should tell you that was one hell of an episode, man. I can't say anything more than it was a wonderful piece of storytelling, and I loved all of the cameos, so to speak, all the returns of different characters that are beloved, and I loved this episode a lot.
Yeah, same here. Anything with Ahsoka, of course, I'm a mega fan, but particularly this episode where we learn about the Grand Inquisitor, we learn about how they're connecting to Yoda, even though Yoda's off in Dagobah, and Kanan being knighted. Kanan being knighted for me was like the coolest thing, you know, for that character who I love so much.
Right.
So I just really enjoyed this episode so much.
Same here, man. So it's only going to get better from here. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. And next episode, we'll be talking about season 2, episode 19. It's called The Forgotten Droid. There's only 4 episodes left in this second season. So, I mean, that's pretty cool, man. It feels like we've been on season 2 for a while, but I guess so, because it was 22 of them. But it is only going to get better. It's going to ramp up from here. The last final 4 episodes, I'm pretty sure, are going to just keep on rolling from what this episode kicked off. So, if y'all are new here by chance, this is the part where I ask you, please like, share, subscribe, and rate. I would very much appreciate it. Also, for you traditional podcast listeners, I haven't forgotten about you. You can always find us on anywhere that you find podcasts. Just search Good Morning Lothal, the unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. Any closing comments, Rolly?
No, I just hope all you rebels out there have a great weekend. And Pete, I hope that you get better soon and get back to 100% as soon as you can.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. So, if nothing else, then this has been your host, Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora,
saying, may the Force be with you always. Goodbye from Lothal.